How's it going, guys, and welcome to episode 2 of what I'm now going to be calling Starting Mountain Biking, the definitive guide, because of the fact that I really enjoyed making the first one. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about mountain bike disciplines. Mountain biking is not just mountain biking, there's loads of different disciplines. I'm going to be covering the four main ones that I feel are the main ones, and then hopefully that'll help you kind of decide on what mountain bike discipline it is that you want to get into. And this is really important because it really affects which mountain bike you should be looking at when it comes to that. So it's that time again, isn't it? Let's roll my fancy new intro. Okay guys, just real quick before we start, if you want to get to know me, see some POV rides, see series like this, see me review equipment, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button below, as you'll see on my cool little phone demo thing here now. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so as you don't miss any of my videos in this series especially. I'm also on Patreon now, and what that means is that I'm looking to get crowdfunding for this kind of creative outlet of mine. What that funding will go towards is me upgrading equipment, me being able to physically set aside work days. I work for myself, so I can say, right, I'm not going to do my normal job on a Wednesday, I'm going to do YouTube. That's what that money will go towards, freeing up time. So that's Patreon. Okay guys, so if you watch my last videos and you're going through the process with me, which you probably won't be, you'll probably be watching this retrospectively, but basically my first video in this series was about trying before you buy. So for me, the next logical step in the series is for us to start looking at the various mountain bike disciplines.
Logical.
And for me to explain them a little bit, and then for me to then show you the kind of different designs that go into the mountain bikes when you decide on what discipline it is that you're going to settle on. There's some real obvious stuff, and then there's some less obvious stuff that you may not notice, so that's what we're going to look at today. So without further ado, the first discipline, mountain bike discipline, that we're going to look at is cross country. It's also abbreviated to XC, but it's cross country. Now cross country, a few of the disciplines are split into different things really. It's like, you know, there's racing that's associated with XC, and then there's the hobby itself that's related to XC or cross country. The racing side of cross country is basically the only competitive mountain bike race that you'll see where the riders start en masse. Everyone starts together, just like, you know, the London Marathon, like a running race, like road riding. They all start at the same time, and it's a physical race. So in terms of racing, it's not downhill racing. It's kind of like the off-road version of road riding. You get ups, you get downs, you get all kinds of different terrain to ride over. But it's a race, so it's all about fitness. In terms of the design of the bike, it's all about getting the bike as light as it possibly can be, and it's about, the bike is all designed about converting that energy that the rider's putting into the pedals when he's pedaling, converting that energy as efficiently as possible into a forward motion on the bike. So the bikes are mega stiff, so as all of that energy goes into forward motion, they're mega light, tyres have got not much rolling resistance. It's all about going forward as fast as you can. Now the hobby side of cross-country mountain biking is, it's just a really great way of getting out into the countryside and enjoying nature instead of kind of walking or running or whatever. Get yourself a good cross-country bike if you're not into all the downhill stuff, and you've just got a really great way of one, working on your fitness, maybe even pushing your fitness to its extreme, and just getting out in the great outdoors. It's just a really great kind of mountain bike discipline for that. So now that we've briefly covered what cross-country is, it's best for us now to jump into my computer back there and have a look at a cross-country bike and the design of it, how the kind of mountain bike discipline in itself affects the design of the bike. So let's do that now. Let's jump into the computer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Canyon bikes for the duration of this video. Basically, this is Canyon's cross-country bike. It's the Lux. Like I said just now, the bike is designed to be as light and stiff as it possibly can to turn those pedal revolutions into forward motion as efficiently as possible. The bikes have got a really steep head angle, as you can see here. That means that the forks are more upright in the vertical position. They've got really long stems to kind of put the rider in a more comfortable position, leant forward for really putting some power down on those pedals. It's got big wheels, probably 29ers. I would say most competitive cross-country bikes now are 29ers, and they're pretty much just designed for the task at hand, which is covering ground fast. These bikes are not designed for descent in mind. They obviously do descend during cross-country races, and some cross-country racers are really good at descent, but these bikes, you wouldn't buy this bike if that's what you're after doing, descending all the time. So they're often carbon fibre frames, but that goes for most bikes these days. A nice wide ratio of gears, you know, is what you need for a bike like this. Short travel on the suspension front and back if it's got dual suspension. 100mm is all you need. It's got nice small rotors on the brakes. They're probably just dual piston brakes as well there. 160mm on the rotor, just nice and small, doesn't need to be any bigger than that. And then the tyres will be nice and thin and not too gnarly, just to keep that rolling resistance down and the weight down as well. So it's great for ripping out the miles, but not really suitable or robust enough for really gnarly downhill on a regular basis. So what we're going to do is my mate Jeff, I'm going to put him on the bike. It seems ridiculous this, I know, but it serves the purpose on what it is that I'm trying to show you. So if we put Jeff on the bike, let's give Jeff some trail here to ride on, and then what we'll do is we'll point Jeff downhill. So straight away you can see kind of his body position. I know that this is kind of ridiculous. If I stick the centre of gravity line on Jeff there now, you'll see that because of the length of the top tube of the bike, the kind of length from the seat to the stem, and then because of the length of the stem combined, his weight is far too forward. His eye line is in front of the stem there. The seat is too high. Even if the seat was all the way down, it would still be too high for getting your ass right down over that back seat properly. So basically it's just this bike on a big descent is putting Jeff too far forward on the bike. So let's put him on the flat again, and you can see he's in the perfect position for long pedally rides in the country, which might be just the ticket for you. So yeah, just a quick summary on cross-country riding. I personally would say that it's, if I was getting into cross-country, it's all about getting in the outdoors, pushing your fitness to the extreme. It's not really about the big descents and that side of things, but it's just a really great way to get out in nature and just enjoy yourself. So that's cross-country. So next up we're going to come on to, I'm just going to call it trail riding. You get, basically because you get trail bikes, trail riding isn't in itself really a discipline. I guess cross country is the closest thing if you were going to race trail type riding stuff. Enduro's the next level up, but a trail bike sits in between a cross-country bike in terms of trying to keep weight nice and light, keeping the bike so as it can basically cover lots of miles, but the geometry just evolves a little bit towards the downhill side of things, just so as you can rip it down some gnarly sort of steep downhill stuff as well. If you want to get into more of that sweet single track descent that really gets your heart pumping, then this bike is perfectly capable of doing that. So what we do again is we'll jump into the computer and I'll bring up Canyon's trail bike. I'll bring up Canyon's real nice trail bike as well. This is the Canyon Spectral. This is the real high-end one. So basically a trail bike, like I said just now, takes some of the characteristics of an XC bike to keep weight to a minimum for covering big miles in the saddle, but also starts to evolve towards the other end, encompassing more of that adrenaline-fueled descending geometry. They're often carbon frames, like I said just now. A lot of bikes are carbon frames now. You just have to pay for that kind of privilege. But an alloy frame would do nicely actually in this category of bike, I personally think. It's got nice one-by drivetrain on it, which is perfect. It's got 130 to 140mm of playful, like air sprung suspension. These bikes are great for that sort of thing, just real playful suspension. Mid-sized rotors, sort of 160, 180, maybe 160 on the back, 180 on the front, to stop you on those descents, and nice tyres that find a nice middle ground between grip, kind of weight, and rolling resistance. Because this bike is still sort of in the XC to Enduro range, that's quite important. So if we put Jeff on this bike again, point him, give him some trail there again, point him downhill, you'll see that slacker geometry and stem allows him to get his weight back slightly further. You'll see his eye line is now more in line with that stem, whereas on the cross-country bike he was further forward, and hopefully that, you know, so he can basically get his arse over that back seat a lot nicer now, and hopefully that would incorporate a nice dropper post as well, as you can see on this bike. So basically trail riding to me is just a nice happy medium. You get yourself a trail ride, if you get yourself like a decent trail bike like the Spectral that you saw then, you can cover a lot of different bases on that, from XC right up into some sort of enduro riding as well. So that's a real good choice, that one. And that brings us sailing into what is my kind of thing, if you like, on a mountain biking, which is enduro. It's enduro all mountain. You do see that enduro and all mountain bikes with some manufacturers are slightly different. I can't remember which is the bigger Traveller and stuff, the All Mountain or the Enduro, but they're super close. And there's also Super Enduro now, like the Canyon Torque, which I'll flick up on the screen there now. But they're all so close that I'm just going to encompass it all into Enduro. Now, Enduro as a race discipline is actually really cool. It's downhill racing, but it's different from downhill racing in the sense that as a race layout, they have sort of different stages, like 4 or 5 stages, and the riders have got to get themselves to the top of each descent. So they go up to they climb basically first, whether they walk, push, ride. They get their bike up to the top of the first descent, race down it under like a time trial basis. When they get to the bottom, they've got to make their way up to the top of the next trailhead for the next descent. That's Enduro as kind of a race layout. If you look at that in terms of a hobby, what Enduro riding is like me, the bike itself will allow you to do nice long trail ridey days, not quite full on XC days, but really the mentality that you need to be in to get an Enduro bike is you're just looking for the most efficient way to get from the bottom of the last descent to the top of the next. So the way I lay out my rides, I'm looking to get as many gnarly descents in as I can, and the ground that's in between the two, I look to make it not too steep, nice and easy to get to, just make it so as I can get from the bottom of the last descent to the top of the next one nice and efficiently. It's all about the descending. That's what Enduro is as like a hobby. So again, how does that affect the style of the bike? Let's jump into the computer again and have a quick look at Jeff on an Enduro bike. So an Enduro bike is like a more aggressive trail bike. We do start paying for the kind of gnarly application of the bike in terms of it being downhill orientated. It starts getting heavier, the suspension starts getting bigger, everything starts getting more robust. So you do start paying in terms of the weight, but it all lends to the performance of the bike being, honed in on downhill, going downhill fast. But again, carbon fiber tech is so good now that you can get these bikes in carbon fiber. Obviously, they are mega expensive, the high-end carbon fiber Enduro bikes, because they kind of encompass the best of all the components that you can get. An alloy, I ride an alloy Enduro bike, and I'm perfectly happy with that. It's perfectly fine for what I do. It's still with a 1x big cassette on the back, because you still got to get up to the top of those hills. 150 to 160 mil of travel now, which can be air for the more playful style of rider, but you started to see coils on the back of Enduro bikes now for riders who just really like to be more planted and fast. Big rotors, 180 mil front and back, probably like I run on mine, to stop you on the really steep downhills, and then really gnarly tyres that will start to sacrifice the weight. Normally I run like a double down on the back, but without the wire bead, so it's not the heaviest tyre, but it is a downhill tyre, because you just want that robustness and grip over anything else. So if we put Jeff on the bike and point him downhill, you'll see an even slacker geometry. You can't really see it so much in terms of where Jeff is sitting on the bike. It's hard to demonstrate with a little drawn lizard, but it's he is going to be further back over the bike, and then the stem is pushing him further back again. The stem on these bikes, the stems are, the bars are almost on top of the stereo tube of the forks on these bikes, so that all plays very well for him, lends very well for him being back further over the bike. And yeah, this is what the bike is designed for, guys, pointing downhill. So for me, Enduro riding, the reason I ride Enduro and not downhill, which is the end of the spectrum that I'm more interested in, kind of between trail and Enduro, not really the XC side of things, the reason that I go for Enduro is that I still want the full mountain bike experience. I still want to get out, cover a good amount of miles, get out of breath on the ascents, but my priority is getting really good descending in. So Enduro is perfect if you've got that mentality the same as me, where you want that full mountain bike experience, get outside, but some really adrenaline fueled descents there as well. I love Enduro. So that, guys, brings us to the extreme, which is downhill. So downhill racing as a race layout, it's like Enduro in terms of the fact that it's a downhill timed race, like time trials, but the difference here is that the riders are taken to the top of the downhill descents. It's exactly the same when you take that to the kind of hobbyist downhill riding. If you buy a downhill bike, you've got a one-trick pony on your hands. You can only take that bike to places where you can do uplifted downhill, whether you self-uplift in a car or whether you go to somewhere that's like a bike park that uplifts. That's all you can do with a downhill bike. Obviously, during a race, a rider will be out of saddle pedaling to get over little lips and stuff like that, and pedaling to pick up speed, but you never ever see anyone on a downhill bike sitting down during descent, or you shouldn't do anyway. So again, how does that affect the design of the bike? Let's jump into the laptop and see what Jeff's got to say about the whole situation. So a downhill bike is much more aggressive than the other bikes in terms of the geometry and the robustness. So it yields a lot of it sacrifices weight. It gets much heavier because of the fact that it needs a long fork, it needs a big coil on the back, it needs everything to be nice and robust. And everything about it just screams ride me downhill fast, I reckon. That's what they're designed for. So again, these bikes do come in carbon fibre, but alloying is perfectly fine for this. The cassette on this one is almost invisible because you just don't need the gears other than to pick up speed on downhills with slightly less of a severe gradient. 200 mil and up suspension soaks up everything that you know, and keeps the bike really well planted for speed. 200 mil rotors at least, and 4 piston calipers, so as you can really stop this bike. It's heavy, it's going to be going fast, that's really important. And then the tyres, this is just the most extreme of tyres that you'll see, probably wire beads, to real heavy sidewalls, real heavy tyres, but everything is just about grip. So let's go and see Jeff and tip him up again, and you'll see he's now way back on the bike. This is where this little thing, you know, this little drawing shows quite well how it works. You see Jeff's eye line is way behind where the direct mount stem is. Yeah, it's just, this is what the bike is for. Yeah, you can just really see that this bike is for downhill, absolutely. So what I'll do now is I'll bring up the bikes side by side so as you can really see the differences right next to each other. If you're not sure about the mountain bike discipline that you're going to go for, I would personally recommend either trail or enduro, because both of these bikes will cross-pollinate into other stuff. If you buy a trail bike, then you can do XC really well, cross country really well, obviously trail riding, and you can dabble in enduro, no problem whatsoever, but you do sacrifice like the bike park end of things. And then enduro is the opposite. With enduro bikes, you can obviously do enduro trail riding, you can go to a bike park, no problem, but you do sacrifice the XC side of things, which is, again, they're both really good choices. It's just what end of the spectrum you see yourself being on: big miles, cross country rider, or ripping it downhill, maybe even in bike parks. Okay, so that's it, guys. First off, I'd like to thank Canyon for sending me all those wicked bikes and letting Jeff have a go on them. I'd love to say that no lizards were harmed during the making of this video, but Jeff did get a little bit out of control when he had to go on the sender. He'll recover, he's absolutely fine, but he did have a bit of an off on the sender. No scratches or anything on the bike, Canyon, so no problem there. I really hope you found that video useful. In the next video, we're going to start getting right into the nitty gritty, and I'm going to start telling you the different ways that you can find bikes, or the ways that you buy bikes. It's not about finding bikes the next one, it's about the different ways of buying bikes. Sounds a bit cryptic, but you'll see what I mean. Right into the nitty gritty then. So yeah, hope you enjoyed it, guys. Don't forget to give me a like and a comment there below. We'll see you in episode 3 in a few days on your bikes.